While connected technology is essential for unlocking new efficiencies on the production floor, it's also presented hackers with new opportunities to steal valuable IP and data. To support OT professionals in their battle with cyber criminals, we launched the Security Breach podcast. In each of our over 100 episodes, we've brought in cybersecurity specialists to provide valuable insights and break down critical topics. As a go-to podcast for our listeners, we want to help you align your brand with our expertise. By sponsoring our podcast, your brand will build trust, and your message will stand out to an audience searching for tools to assist their cybersecurity efforts. Secure your share in this rapidly growing segment by sponsoring Security Breach. Contact us today to learn more. Hi, I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. We talk a lot about the growing complexity of hacking groups and how their tools and tactics continue to evolve. One such evolution is the ongoing specialization that runs rampant throughout the black hat community, especially when it comes to ransomware. The rise of initial access brokers, affiliate groups, spoofing domains, dark web communities, and more are fueling ransomware as a service groups and posing new cybersecurity challenges. And while numerous reports detail the rise in ransomware attacks and the escalating amounts being paid in seeking a reprieve from denial of service, data extortion, and supply chain hacks, one recent finding really stood out. In their annual State of Ransomware report, Black Fog stated that manufacturing has the highest number of undisclosed ransomware attacks when compared to all other industries. So, as tough as we know the ransomware challenge is, it's actually a bit worse than we can even acknowledge because of the growing number of attacks that go unreported. Fortunately, we have an army of highly skilled individuals working to combat these threats. And that includes our guest for today's episode. It's my pleasure to welcome Nick Oram, Senior Manager of Domain and Dark Web Monitoring Solutions at Fortra, to the show. Nick, thanks so much for joining us today, and welcome to Security Breach. So I know one of the things we're going to get into is we're going to talk about these initial access brokers and the bigger role they're playing in a lot of ransomware attacks. But before we get into that, I'd just kind of like to get your thoughts a little bit on sort of how all of these ransomware attacks are evolving a little bit. We know the tactics are sort of tried and true, but the dynamic is changing. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to start off with some stats that we've witnessed over the years, and kind of especially some tactics that have been used in the industrial sector. So I'll kind of just get with some stats here, but after a slow start to 2024, ransomware attacks definitely picked up, especially Q2 and Q4. Had about 1,800 incidents, about 33% of the total happened towards the end of the year. So there was a big uptick at the end of the year in overall ransomware attacks. And I think a lot of it, I know with law enforcement, they did major actions against Lockbit to kind of disrupt their activities, but I guess it's kind of like a double-edged sword because it kind of resulted in a lot of splintering of groups of maybe members from them making their own. And the one thing that we saw in 2024 was there was a 40% jump in the amount of ransomware groups, like active groups out there. So about 68 to 95. So that I think that's one. It's great that they try to shut Lockbit down and disrupt their infrastructure, but then they created another problem where more groups are splintering out. So there's more groups out there trying to get notoriety out there. But some trends that you kind of seen, I think from 21 to 2023. I think the big thing was VPN exploitation was a big way of how these ransomware groups got access. Things about going against like unpatched vulnerabilities and things like Fortinet and things like that. Then once they get their access, they kind of can move laterally throughout the organization. But I think in 2024, what kind of the trend was ransomware operators kind of using more advanced tactics by combining vulnerability exploitation with also credential-based attacks that bypass MFA. I think that's kind of a trend that was being seen out there. So things like credential stuffing, hash-to-hash attacks, brute forcing, and kind of the point of our discussion today, I think a big thing is their interaction with IABs, initial access brokers, and how I think that trend is going to keep continuing throughout this year.
Absolutely. Yeah, just a couple of those stats kind of stuck out because we've heard a little bit of that before. the first quarter of last year, a lot of people looked at a downward trend in ransomware attacks. Do you feel like that almost created a false sense of security? Like people thought, hey, we're doing the right things and keeping people out?
I seem like that. I think, like you said, like a false sense of security. But I
Yeah.
think things like, I know we can chat about it probably later, but things like the whole ransomware as a service model, affiliate programs with these ransomware groups. I think that's also increasing attacks as well, based on those models. Like any of those ads, like it's phishing as a service, ransomware as a service, like those models make it easier to, increase your scale of attacks, but also I would say less tech savvy people can also maybe participate in it as well, just based on
Yeah.
using their infrastructure to do the attacks and things like that.
No, it makes sense. And then the other thing that we always hear about the fourth quarter, I mean, there's a reason why, October is cybersecurity month. We want people to gear up, is we always hear like these hacking groups basically have quotas and numbers and budgets to hit as well towards the end of the year. So they tend to ramp up their efforts. Is that what you're seeing as well?
I know just the one group that kind of burst on the scene last year, especially towards the end of the year. RansomHub was a big one that kind of well, they were kind of around 2024, but I think the last quarter they had like over 500, I think, attacks. I think just them alone. I think they're kind of using the model, trying to like get out as many as they can to try to increase the ransom payments because ransom payments year over year are down. Like the company's actually paying out, but if you look at the trends, the amount of attacks are still going up. So they're not stopping.
I mean, is that a little bit of the, spray and pray type of approach, just getting as much stuff out there so they can find the soft spots, or are they more or less targeted, I guess, in that approach?
I think they're a lot of it's targeting specific industries too that they have better chances to get payouts from. If you think healthcare, financial sector, I would say manufacturing as well. Areas where they know that those companies can't have as much downtime because they're going to have a lot of financial loss depending on how long systems are down. And they could also be, just thinking healthcare, for example. I know their security isn't always the most up to date on things, so I know they're always a sought after industry to go after. Plus, the data is valuable to people, if healthcare data.
Yeah. Well, we have the same dynamics here in the industrial side and manufacturers, a lot of intellectual property that's out there for people to grab onto.
Yep.
Denial of service attacks and shutting down factories is a huge concern. Nick, we've talked about these IABs before, but being that you're a little bit closer to this subject matter, maybe you can fill us in a little bit. What sort of spawned these entities in the first place? It's really interesting to see a ransomware group sort of specializing in different areas. So maybe you can give us a little bit of a history lesson.
Yeah, I think what IABs, and for folks who don't know what an initial access broker is, just like a quick definition, they're kind of the ones who are doing the initial research on, finding what organizations they want to target. They're the ones carrying out the initial compromise to get the data or intrusion into some systems. Then they're selling that typically on dark web forums. It could be chat sites like Telegram or other dark web adjacent sites as well. But we see it pretty common on dark web forums, be it like XSS forum, breach forums. Very popular. You see them all the time. I can probably check any day of the week, and there's probably like another IAB post on there. But I think they become attractive to ransomware groups because they're the ones doing all the initial legwork in the beginning, right? The ransomware group isn't if you think about how much time it probably takes to investigate what areas to hit, how to get in, how to deploy whatever tactic they are to get intrusion into that internal system, that takes up so many hours. So it's saving ransomware groups time where they can just buy the access from this IAB, then just launch their attack, so they can focus on making their malware better, they're improving their extortion attempts. It's giving them scalability, but also allowing them to launch more attacks because all that initial research and legwork is done right in the beginning by the IAB, which I think that's the important thing.
It's just interesting to hear you talk about it that way because it sounds like any business that would outsource any type of process that takes away from what they want to do in turn, like at their core level. We'll outsource accounting because we're a marketing firm or whatever the case is. It's very interesting.
And there's like, and obviously there's no big monetary gain for these IABs to do it. I know ransomware groups are, we'll pay them the fees. Usually they're in the thousands of dollars per access, but that depends on the size of the company, what the access entails. As obviously it can go higher if it's something like really, really sensitive. Um, I think the thing too is with IABs. I have a feeling just based on like how some groups where you see they're launching so many attacks, it wouldn't surprise me if IABs are working directly with ransomware groups behind the scenes. So you're not seeing them publicly post on forums about like who they've compromised and whatnot. It's kind of, it benefits both parties where the ransomware group is obviously connected straight to like someone who's an IAB and specializes in that so they can use that for scalability, launching more attacks. But I think on the IAB side, it's a way for them to kind of evade law enforcement more because they're not as publicly out there posting their breaches and things like that. I mean, some of them are pretty cautious on these forums of what they post, where they won't highlight the company. They'll be like, so and so manufacturing company of 500 billion in Missouri or whatever, and like I have this access to it. But there are some that do post the company. It wasn't too long ago I saw a big manufacturing company. They just straight up mentioned the company name on there. So some of them don't care, but some do. It kind of depends on the group.
Well, it's self-promotion, right? Again, getting
It's
back
all,
to
yeah,
how they operate, just like any other company would, they're touting their expertise. It's
yep,
interesting. At the same
yep, and
time, also terrifying.
yeah, and they're very good at it too. They know how to exploit. No, they've been common doing things like exploiting like VPNs, RDPs, things like that. They've always been good at exploiting that stuff, but probably the scarier thing is them exploiting like a 0 day or something like that. That's probably the scarier one. I remember it was a couple years ago with the Move It vulnerability, just with how many companies actually use that file sharing software. That was a big one that was getting exploited tons in the past, and they took advantage of it. You saw like countless posts of like another one from this vulnerability, and actors were calling it out too, saying, "Yeah, we used this vulnerability. This is how we got in or whatever." Because it did take a bit for them to patch it to fix it, but when the damage is already done, that info is already out there by those guys.
Exactly. So, would you say the increased prominence of these IABs is that's what's helping drive up the level of ransom amounts as well? I mean, if you're a ransomware as a service provider, or if that's your cover, I mean, you've got to pay the IAB now. So, are you going to charge a higher ransom because you use those guys?
It could be possible also with the affiliate programs. Some of them are giving like 10, 15%. They take off the top from the affiliate, but I mean, it's lucrative to them. I mean, they're especially the affiliate programs because they're not the ones either. People are just using their infrastructure to launch the attack, so they no they're getting money either way if they pay out. So
Crazy.
yeah.
So, as these IABs are rising in prominence, they're being used more. There's affiliate programs. There's obviously a lot of dialogue between them and the big ransomware players that we know.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean from a response and defensive posture position? Like, what does that tell us, or what should we be doing then to respond or react?
Mm-hmm. I definitely no. I think you definitely need some kind of like dark web monitoring solution. You need to be where these guys are posting and interacting is important. Um, because there's prominent forums that they're all over posting, or if there's Telegram channels, you need to know what they're saying, how they're operating. Even I would say, keeping an eye on the ransomware leak sites, like knowing like maybe what organizations they're targeting, what sectors maybe they're targeting, maybe if they give any indications of how they're gaining access to those organizations, so you can kind of like stay up to date and try to protect yourself, especially if you're in a similar industry, because they may be could go after you too if you maybe had the same kind of vulnerability potentially.
Absolutely. So, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about Fortra, some of the stuff you
Yeah.
guys are doing also to support industrial cybersecurity.
Yeah, so coming from me, I'll probably like kind of start with from the DRP side because I work on the digital risk protection side at Fortra, but we do know our goal is to protect our clients across the whole attack chain, because at any time a threat actor can pick certain areas to go after, but coming from the DRP side, like one thing I think is definitely important is like security awareness training. I think that's a big one that most companies should have. Educating your employees about what methods these guys are doing, different tactics they use to try to get internal access to you, be it like phishing methodologies, different things like that. But also if you guys like use like simulated phishing campaigns, I think those are very valuable as well for companies. You can have your employees test it out to see if they actually are understanding the material, and then you can see obviously who clicked on the fake phishing email. So I think simulated phishing is definitely important. Dark web monitoring, like I said, you want to be monitoring the areas where these guys are operating so you can get that intelligence. Also, I think on the email protection side, phishing side, having monitoring that's protecting your clients against phishing, taking down those phishing contents to get them removed as quickly as you can. Disrupting the chain, as you would say. But also we interact with law enforcement on these things. We share IOCs that we're finding out there as well, so organizations can use that as well. On a domain side, we're protecting type of squatting domains, them trying to abuse various syntax, other brands. So we go after those as well. I think there was an interesting story that a ransomware group actually spun up a lookalike domain and like kind of spoofed it as like the company's real site, but they posted all the leaked data on the lookalike domain. So if you had that kind of monitoring, we would find it, then we'd be able to work with the registrar or the ISP to get that site removed. But yeah, it was a typo squad of the company, which is kind of funny they did it that way.
Man, they can be malicious for sure.
Mm-hmm. But we also offer some other stuff too on the Fortra side. We have vulnerability scanning and things like that. We're also doing things like port checking, trying to see some other things we do. Pen testing, exploiting vulnerable IoT devices. Fortra does that kind of things as well. And many other things too. We're a pretty diverse cybersecurity company now. So, if you kind of think anything along the attack chain, we're able to help monitor that for not just industrial companies, kind of any industry out there.
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you spend way too much time online, first of all, same. And second, you need promo guide talk pills. I'm Rawal, and with Alex, we break down everything happening in tech, digital marketing, and the internet's latest chaos. No boring corporate talk, just real discussions with real opinions. So go on, press play. You know you want to.
Absolutely. No, we'll put a link in the description for the episode. Check out the website. Lots of great stuff going on at Fortra. Nick, you mentioned a lot of different things there. A lot of it comes down to, in my opinion, the attitude a company has towards cybersecurity training. Everything you mentioned there makes a ton of sense. What have you seen as maybe being some of the differences between companies who are able to get their employees to really grab onto this training and really take it seriously and really pay attention to it versus maybe those who are kind of checking the box and moving on with their day?
We always kind of have the mentality, like especially we do these simulations and learnings too. We kind of are like, the motto is like practice what you preach, right? We'd be kind of hypocrites if we weren't doing the same kind of trainings as well that we're promoting to our clients. So I know in our organization, we take it very seriously. Like everyone in our company is doing them. We do simulated phishing campaigns as well at our organization to help protect people. But I think people definitely need to take it seriously, especially kind of like the human side of all this stuff, right? It only takes one person, if they hit the right person to, get the access that they need. So I think this training and things like that is, so important in this day and age, especially with like things like simple phishing is still like a very common tactic that is still used, and people still fall for it, right? Clicking on links you shouldn't, opening attachments. But I think the big thing, especially on the organization side, impersonating executives, I think that's a big one that one definitely still gets people, be it if it's so there's social engineering or impersonating coming from even like social media, LinkedIn and things like that. definitely it's important to have this training to understand like what these threat actors are doing, how they're evolving, different tactics they're using, because they're always changing things, right? If us cybersecurity companies keep taking down their content, they'll figure out different ways to try to bypass our monitoring or will allow us to take things down. So they adapt, we adapt. It's always us versus them going back and forth. So definitely employees need to know about all this stuff as well, because if you're not doing it, you're kind of leaving yourself open for these IABs to go after you, I think.
Absolutely. I want to stay on the human element a little bit. I think that's so important and something that we maybe don't talk about enough, especially in the industrial sector where we're focused on all these operational assets. But one of the things that I think we're getting better at not doing and getting past is sort of that shame and blame approach when somebody does click on a phishing link or accidentally downloads a piece of malware, whatever the case may be. From your experience, Nick, what's the best way to approach some of those situations in responding when somebody does make a mistake?
I mean, it kind of fits more my managerial style too. I think I always use this as like a learning opportunity, like explaining like what they did wrong or whatever, like explain the whole thing to them so they can learn from it so they don't do it again. Because I think if you just shame someone, say they clicked on a fish, right? One, they're not going to be very motivated. And two, they're probably not going to learn from it, right? If you say, John, why did you click on this link or whatever? Like, I think you need to have that whole educational response back to them to show them, like, hey, like, I know we had a simulated phishing campaign and I had a user click on it, but like we went through the email together and explained, like, hey, these were the different indications of it being a phish. Maybe hovering over the link or the language like has some type of them like rushing to click it. There's always a sense of urgency, in phishing emails to get you to click it without really thinking. It's kind of the whole thing. So I like to use it as education. I think that's probably the better way it should be taken. Because if you don't learn, they're just gonna do it again. Like, yeah, then they know to take it seriously as well. If you review it with them. So yeah, I think education is always important.
Yeah, I think we had somebody on the show from a previous issue basically said, never let a good hack go to waste. Like there's always something you can learn from it and process that internally. And I think a lot of that comes from just the culture that's created. It starts at the top in terms of embracing cybersecurity and trying to, again, have this ongoing dynamic of we're always going to be learning, we're always going to be trying to get better.
It's like the same thing with like discovering vulnerabilities, right? Maybe one gets discovered, but then you're better at planning for those in the future, understanding, like this was found now, maybe we need to patch like these areas because they can see that happening. So I think everything should be used as learning experiences. Instead of shaming someone doesn't help at all.
Yeah, I agree 100%. One of the things you touched on that we haven't talked about a lot on security breach, and it's part of your role, is monitoring the dark web. Yeah. I think in the industrial side, we've got a misnomer there where we think about the dark web, well, that's drugs and other illicit activity. What would that have to do with me and manufacturing? Yeah. Help set us straight a little bit here. Why should we be looking at the dark web, and where should we start?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just drugs and all that stuff, right? People always think it's drug paraphernalia, guns, and all that stuff, but there's definitely tons of financial crime on the dark web. If you think of banking institutions selling credit card data, but also there's a lot, especially with IABs and things like that, selling account data. There's marketplaces out there. One's called Russian Marketplace that sells info stealer data. So it's essentially selling access to a machine, right? And it's stealing all the machines, like passwords, cookies, tokens. Essentially, you can mimic that person in a browser if you buy this info stealer from there. And they're generally cheap, right? $3 to $15 to get access to someone's computer. But what these IABs are doing is they're looking for internal logins on there. And think if it was like access to like an internal system, like maybe like your IT's Teams Jira or something, right? You could potentially do a lot of damage from there. And I know some ransomware groups, that's one way they've gotten in, right, is buying these compromised machines where they can see. So that's like another threat that's out there. Could definitely hit industrial companies. And also too, like especially with forum monitoring, or if it's chat channels like Telegram and things like that. I always say you never know if you're going to be targeted out there. I know I have a story where we had like a very small credit union out there. Like, we probably wouldn't think they'd ever get targeted, but someone, had the want and the ask to try to target them with, I think they wanted to actively DDoS them or, vandalize their site. They had probably some disgruntled reason why they wanted to target them, but it ended up on a popular forum. But so if you don't really have the monitoring, you're not going to see that content. So even with executives, right? We see, executives being posted on the dark web as well, especially with the recent shooting of the United Healthcare CEO. Things like doxing and stuff like that is important to monitor. It wasn't too long after that incident, it was maybe 4 or 5 days. I found a full docs of a prominent Fortune 500 CEO. Included their address information, house layout, stuff about their spouse or children. So that content's out there too, and that can hit any sector. It doesn't really matter. If someone wants to target someone, they'll find the means to find the info and post it.
We'll be back after a quick break.
AI is changing the game of business. Will you be on the winning team? I'm Jordan Wilson, the host of the Everyday AI podcast, and your coach to help you learn the X's and O's of AI. Artificial intelligence isn't just a new player in the game, it's a new sport altogether. So if you don't quickly put AI into play, your competitors will run up the score. I've spent my whole life building winning teams, from coaching basketball to working with big players like Nike and Jordan Brand. My next move? Helping you win with Everyday AI. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or on everydayaipodcast.com. Let's tap into AI together and put points on the board.
Yeah, it just illustrates, in manufacturing, we think we operate in this bubble a little bit and nobody's paying attention. We know that they are now, and we know that just as we expand sort of our operational footprint, we need to expand the cybersecurity footprint. Just talking about these things that are now available on the dark web and being able to monitor that and understand what's going on is going to be so important as part of Industry 4.0. It's a big part of it going forward.
Yeah, I think just the industry, like industrial industry, just like by example, like what I was saying with, you guys can't afford downtime, right? It's critical. I mean, it makes sense to go after companies like that. Financials always hit on the dark web, right? But I think, I think actors kind of are branching out more to hit more sectors than just financials, because they understand that there is valuable data elsewhere, but then they also know that these companies really can't afford downtimes and other things like that, just based on how they operate.
Well, and that's why they continue to pay, unfortunately. And we'll avoid that topic for now, but at some point that's something we need to dig into as far as when do you pay, how do you handle those types of responses. Mm-hmm. One of the things I'd like to get into, though, is, you talked a lot about phishing before, and I think those phishing attacks are going to continue to escalate, and they're getting smarter and more complicated and more complex because of artificial intelligence and the role a lot of these large language models and machine learning is playing. What's been your experience in terms of AI, its impact maybe on cybersecurity as a whole, but a lot of stuff going on the phishing side?
Mm-hmm. I'm not too familiar on the phishing side. I don't work on that side as much, but I know more on the social media side. I know impersonations have become a big thing with videos impersonating executives. I think the voiceover technology is getting a lot better. It's still a little bit where you can still kind of tell like something's awful, or it's like the whole like emotion of like a certain person is really not there yet. But if you look at this year to last year, I think the tech on that stuff's getting better, and that's kind of where I worry about it, because I could just imagine like phishing, like using that in a phish, like a voice memo or something in an email, and it sounds like your CEO or something. That's where I think it's kind of scary.
And that goes into all, you were talking about the doxing and everything that's going on there. Yeah. All these social engineering campaigns, it's not always about getting all of the information. It's getting bits and pieces that they can plug in.
Yeah, you don't need a lot to, and like the thing too is, when corporations hear about like data breaches, right, they're always more worried about like, does it have username, passwords, access, right? But there's so much other data out there. If it's email addresses, address information, their position at the company, like threat actors can use. It wouldn't take a threat actor too much to say they got like a big email database of a company, right? Then they go through LinkedIn to see like where they work, right? You could target specific people pretty easily. especially if say it was like a newer hire, right? Trying to pretend you're the, like the head of finance or something, or someone they report to, right? Where they maybe not as comfortable in the company and they fall for the social engineering effort against them. Like all that info is out there. It's not like doesn't like let you log into things, but no, it's still actors know how to manipulate that stuff, especially if it's address information. Sometimes that's still common stuff for security questions, so you can plug that in there to see if that works for anything. So it's not just access information. The data that also is with the cred leaks and things is still just as important, I think, as well.
Just want to circle back a little bit. You had mentioned previously about the IABs and how they're able to break through some of these MFA or dual factor authentication logins. That's something we're trying to encourage more manufacturers to use. But now if we're finding that there's vulnerabilities in there, the IABs are getting smarter and breaking through them, I guess, what should we know there about the use of these types of approaches?
I think the one thing, I think I mentioned it before, I think the pass the hash attacks, it's like one thing that they have been doing. And it's kind of like explain what they are is like an adversary is using, stealing a hash user credential, and they use that to create a new user session on the same network. Then like unlike other credential depth attacks, a pass the hash attack does not require the attacker to know or crack the password to gain access to the system. Rather, it uses a stored version of the password to initiate a new system. I think that's a big threat. The other thing I thought that was interesting was the trend of like we saw it this year was the living off the land techniques that these groups are using. I think that was another big one that they're using, especially where they can kind of use legitimate tools already. So they're kind of already, they're sitting in the system without people even knowing because they're like using the legitimate tools. And I think I think that's a scary one.
No, absolutely. Those live off the land attacks are huge in the industrial sector because especially for a lot of smaller manufacturers, they pay the ransom, they think they're clean, and they get hit again in 6 months because they never cleaned them out of the system, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's also, you're seeing instances of also like triple extortion too, where some groups will DDoS them while they're getting hit with the ransomware, which is some nasty stuff to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Nick, this has been great. We've covered a lot of different stuff. Really appreciate the time. As we kind of look down the road a little bit, what are some of the bigger trends or topics, challenges, whatever, that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, so I think I wrote a couple different things that I thought were stuff to look forward to this year. I think the interaction with IABs is not going to go anywhere. Ransomware groups are going to continue to use them to get their internal access just because it's helping them scale, launch more attacks. So that's not going to go anywhere. And I think we talked about it earlier, the crackdown of the like Lockbit, for example. I think it did more harm because it's splintering the groups out more. Now there's more of them. So I don't think that's going away. I think you're going to see more groups going out there because they want the notoriety, the possible financial gain out there. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see that number continue to grow. Also, the ransomware is a service model with affiliate programs. We're already seeing RansomHub launch 500 something attacks in the last quarter. They're already launching more this year. So I think that's going to be a strong component of ransomware. Is this that as a service model, I think is pretty effective. The other thing I saw, I think, focusing also on hitting industries that can't have the downtime, like healthcare, financial services, industry, manufacturing. They're still going to be hit, right? There's the incentive to attack them still there. There's, I think too, is also maybe looking for organizations that don't have any other options to pay the ransom, where like that's maybe the really only thing that they can do. Or if they notice organizations that really don't have good, effective network segmentation, where if obviously if things are siloed off, it's harder for the malware to move laterally. But if they find organizations that aren't really deploying that tactic, I mean, that's like the one you'd want to go after because you can get into way more systems. But one thing I thought was pretty cool, and I just actually found this out last week. There is a new ransomware group where they don't have too many victims yet. I think it still might be only one. But they're using like a new tactic where they're focusing more within their posts about the damages that of legality that can happen if this data breach goes open, or focusing more on contacting legal authorities or like big media outlets about the breach if they don't pay. Because historically, a lot of these ransomware groups, if you've been on their leak sites, they have timers where they're saying, we're posting this in 10 days, then we're going to publish data. Or some of them post samples where they'll show some of the data, be like, hey, if you don't pay the ransom, we'll publish more of this data. Now, and some of these groups have like in the FAQ sections about like the damages that can occur if they don't pay. But this group is really putting it out there to try to pressure the victim to pay. And like I was saying before, the amount of payments has decreased, right, year over year. So it wouldn't surprise me if ransomware groups try to think of some different ways to put more pressure on the victim to pay. Like the reputational damages that can occur, legal fines. They have like a whole section on their website about like recent legal cases and how much those companies had to pay for the data breaches that happened. So it's an interesting tactic to try to do it that way. And they're like probably the first group I saw that's really been doing it like is predominantly as they're doing it. Like it's like you see the leak and it has all the language about the threats if they don't pay in it. Usually the groups aren't as out front with that, right? It's more posting the info, you kind of been shamed on their site, here's the timer, right? These guys look like they're trying to take it farther. So it'd be interesting to see if this group actually grows or if some maybe other groups start trying to do some similar things to increase extortion success rates. I think would be something to look into, I think.
Just another evolution in these groups. I mean, they
They're
continue
always,
to get more and more complex. And from a business perspective, it's impressive. From a white hat perspective, from somebody who doesn't want to see all of these networks get get hit, very sad to see.
Yeah, I mean, they're always evolving, right? Increasing their malware's effectiveness, finding different ways to get the victim to pay, targeting different industries maybe they have more success with. Or maybe even nations as well. Maybe there's better areas in different nations to go after. They have less strict, protocols and things like that.
Interesting stuff, Nick. Thanks so much. The one question I got for you, with all the stuff you're constantly looking at these hackers' websites, monitoring the dark web, in all honesty, like, how do you sleep at night? What are the things that give you some solace that you can still get to sleep?
I think it's gonna be solace that there's companies out there that are actively going after all this stuff, be it credential phishing or if it's testing out these organizations with pen testing and things like that and show like how they got in there. Then you can give that feedback. I think I know we do it at Fortra. I think companies like that are doing a good service to the industry by monitoring all this stuff because obviously adapting to right when threat actors change. Constantly updating to be able to combat those malicious acts. But I think this for me, because more on the dark web side is I think it's important that more companies have it. I know there's some that probably have never thought about having it or they don't think they need it. But like I was saying, you don't know you need it till you get posted on one of these sites. Then you're kind of like running with like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to find someone who can monitor that for you. So I think with organizations that don't have it, I think it's important. For me, I think the best approach is like kind of like a top down where you're covering all aspects of the internet, not just focused on one, because to me, cybersecurity should be a holistic approach where you're monitoring everything throughout the attack chain, not just like one thing that you think is important. Because like you're saying before, having those blinders on that's when you get caught, when you're too focused on one thing. So I think organizations need to kind of, if they're not doing it, changing the way they're looking at cybersecurity and protecting the whole instead of just like little parts of it.
I'd also like to thank you for joining us today, and to catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check Security Breach out wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore on Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@ien.com. For Nick Oram, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.